Monsters are some of the most exciting units to see in combat, with a wide range of aesthetics and animations. Whether they're causing chaos on the front lines or flanking to tear apart the back lines, they're always great fun to watch in combat. But which among them are the very best in class? Well, today we're going to count down the top 10 monsters in Total War Warhammer 3 and find out. Kicking off the list, we have the Chaos Warhounds with Poison, and these are one of the best value units for any faction in the early game. Warhounds in all their forms are excellent early units for flanking enemy armies and tearing into their weak and vulnerable ranged units to cut their legs out from under armies before they can even fire a shot. As well as this, nothing in the game beats Warhounds when it comes to chasing down units while they're retreating to make sure they don't come back. Their combination of incredible speed, high entity count and rapid attack pattern make them the perfect unit for sprinting around the map to wipe out ranged and retreating units in moments. The Chaos Warhounds just so happen to be the statistically best version of this unit, with the best combination of a tiny bit of armor, plenty of attack and damage, and of course that blazing speed. Poison Chaos Warhounds just gives them poison, making them a no-brainer pick for this position. That poison damage will make whatever they attack that much weaker, slower and overall easier to take down for good. We're not even mentioning the fact that they have Vanguard deployment, can hide in the forest and have Strider, meaning nothing can see them coming or outrun them no matter where they try and hide. And of course their obscene speed combined with their small hitbox and sprinkling of missile resist makes them much harder to take out with the monster kryptonite that is ranged units. No matter what faction you're playing as, use this type of unit early on while you can, as they'll make early battles against more ranged focused factions into a cakewalk. And if you happen to be playing as the Warriors of Chaos, you can rest easy knowing you're using the very best in their class with these guys. Next up we have Stone Trolls, and these are quite a mid-game unit from the Greenskins and I believe strike a perfect balance for a monster unit, making them viable to the end if you don't want to spend the big cash on the later, larger and more expensive beasties. They still have that low leadership that Trolls are known for, however the armor here is extremely high, especially for a monster. Combine that with not the worst defense I've ever seen, a few resistances to missiles and spells, and they're actually a lot harder to get rid of than you'd think. They're also not the largest unit in the world, so are harder to hit with range than most, especially once they're integrated into the Greenskin front line, obscuring them even further. Lastly, that regen is still here, so if they do happen to take too much heat, you can just pull them out for a breather and get them back in fighting form in no time. Their damage is another banger, offering the highest of all the troll units with a nice chunk of armor piercing, allowing them to batter enemy front lines no matter how tough they are. There's nothing that's crazily overpowered like the ranged units list was. They're just a really solid unit with very few flaws. Are they perfect? No. Are they overpowered? No, but when you unlock them, they're excellent and will serve you reliably well in battles, which is somewhat of a rarity for monster units. If you're playing as the Greenskins and are pondering on some mid-game monsters, try out the Stone Trolls. They may not have the exciting effects that the Swamp Trolls have, but they'll show up to work and put in a shift every single time, and to me, that's better than any status effect. Next up, the Armored Skin Wolves. We're looping back around to something that's here for its speed. Now, they're not as fast as Warhounds, and this armored version are dropping some speed from the non-armored version. However, gaining this much toughness for only a minor reduction in speed is well worth the cost if you ask me. Plus, the only thing they really need to be faster than is ranged infantry, since that's their main target, so they'll still be speedy enough, no problem. So we have the toughness from the armor and decently high speed. Add on their mid-melee stats, which for a monster is par for the course, their excellent damage that may not be overly armor piercing, but for attacking ranged units will do just fine. Plus, if they get caught out by Cav or something else fast and large, they'll have the anti-large bonus to help them out. They've also got a sprinkling of physical resistance to keep them alive just a little bit more. Plus fear causing sap leadership, the ability to hide in forests whilst moving through any terrain, regenerating HP and frenzy to boost their stats just a little bit more whilst they're healthy. They're a super solid all-around unit with a great balance of everything. They're tough, still scaring the damage department, and can catch up to practically anything on two legs. What more could you want? Next we have the Tomb Scorpion. Now yeah, I know Tombkin units are technically called constructs, but we're going to ignore that because they're the same thing. The Tomb Scorpion is unlocked fairly early on in the Tomb King campaign, and yet I feel could be in your armies all the way to the end game, and it's not just down to their limited recruitment model. This unit is just excellent, and I'm happy to tell you why. Kind of the point of the list. So from the top, their armor is top notch, and while the HP isn't stupidly high, they'll stay alive no problem as long as they're not stood totally still getting picked apart by armor piercing. Their leadership is mid, which is fine for a monster, and that speed is pretty good, especially for something so large. The melee stats seem terrible, but once you remember that this counts for everything they hit with their animations, it makes a whole lot more sense. The animations these guys do are crazy and allow them to hit tens or even hundreds of entities in a single attack animation if enemies are packed tightly enough. These animations also make them incredibly hard to hit in melee or from a range. Now, they're not doing this all the time, so it's not like they're invincible and invisible, but as long as they're fighting, they're very hard to pin down and take out despite their large size. Back to damage, and it's pretty great with plenty of armor piercing named bonus versus infantry, making all those hits while in a blob just a little bit more effective. The charge bonus is even pretty nice, but you'll only really see value upon entering combat since the best use for these guys is sustained fighting, especially with how deep they can bury themselves in enemy lines. Add on the terror they cause and the fact they never retreat, and these guys can rack up a ton of value even if they too eventually fall in combat. Pair them with a Necrotech to keep them buffed to high heaven and healthy, and you'll have a very potent combination indeed. Just missing out on breaking into the top 5, we have the Brood. Horror. This is just another in the long line of Skaven units that makes you audibly say, who the hell thought that this was okay? Going off the size of this thing, you'd assume it was another monster destined for frontlines combat and nothing else. But then you see it. 95 speed. A unit this large can move as fast as Warhounds. Now, does this mean that this is as good as Warhounds at their job of backline harassment and wiping out retreating units? No. Not even close. It does, however, open the door on a range of ways to use this absurd creation. You can throw it into the front lines and it'll do pretty well with reasonable melee stats and extremely high armor piercing and poison damage, or you can send them into the back lines to attack ranged units or casters. Since it's a single entity, it won't wipe out units of infantry quite as fast alone, but single targets it will shred with all of that damage condensed into one place. With that charge bonus, it can even be used to cycle charge anything you like, getting tons of damage onto enemy HP bars with minimal risk of damage. Add on the fear it causes, regeneration and frenzy, and there isn't much this unit can't have a go at. Now, is it the best monster in the game in every category? No, it's not even close, but it can do many jobs pretty damn well, and I'd be a fool to leave it off this list. Simply put, something this large, moving that fast, is hard to stop no matter what you put in front of it. Making it into the top 5, we have Dragon Ogres. These dudes have been great for years. Way back before the rework, when the Warriors of Chaos were the laughingstock of the game, they were still one of the best monster units and arguably one of the best units overall in the entire game. And not much has really changed that. Unlike some other entries on this list, there isn't really one thing that makes them vastly better than anyone else. It's more so that the total package is just so damn good that you can't help but love them. They've got nice armor, nothing crazy but enough to keep them alive against most things that aren't overly elite. Their leadership is actually really high for a monster, so retreating isn't something you'll have to deal with for a very long time. Their speed is pretty great. They're not going to outrun Warhounds or even all Cav, but they're plenty fast for flanking most infantry, no problem. Their melee stats are nicely down the middle of the road, with a nice boost to defense which is rare for monsters. Damage is high, armor piercing, and comes with a bonus versus large, so whether they're fighting Cav, infantry, or other monsters, they'll put in good work. They even have a little bit of charge bonus on the off chance you want to cycle charge them in and out. There really isn't much they can't do since they can fight practically anything and do it pretty damn well. Get them involved in the front lines or hunting large targets, they can do it all. For a monster unit, that is pretty rare and earns them a spot on this list. In 4th position, we have the Zotes. These are extremely similar to the Dragon Ogres, and I know that makes the rare comment that I just said seem kind of like bullshit, but the point here isn't the stats. Overall, they're a little bit faster but not quite as damaging as Dragon Ogres, but they do come with a couple of very powerful abilities that elevate them enough to beat them on this list. Each unit comes with 2 bound spells which they can use at any point regardless of winds of magic. Earthblood for some healing in an area, and Flesh to Stone for added toughness, and they can use this on anything. These are totally free spells, allowing them to bring support to nearby units as well as the usual damage you'd expect, making them into a great addition to any army. They can do all the same jobs as Dragon Ogres, but now also heal and toughen their allies to aid the whole army. Their attacks also reduce magical resistance on enemies, making them a great pairing of a damage caster to maximize the impact of spells even further. And lastly, they have Woodsman, granting them unaffected movement through forests, which is fairly rare in the Beast world, so another great addition. Zotes take everything that makes Dragon Ogres great and then adds on a few more little touches and tweaks to create one very special unit. If you're playing as the Wood Elves and you aren't using these guys, you're really missing out on a truly unique and powerful addition to any army. Picking up the bronze medal, we have the Kadai Destroyer. Is it really a top 10 units video without mention of the Chaos Dwarves? Just about everything about them is overtuned, and this monster roster is no exception. The pinnacle of that roster, the Kadai Destroyer, is the very definition of this. It radiates pure power in every aspect, and even though it has a major weakness that all massive unit has, it really hardly matters. Stats first. Armor that rivals almost anything in the game and a massive HP bar make this into one of the hardest things to kill no matter how much damage you throw at it. Reasonably high leadership that's actually unbreakable as long as they stay above 25% HP means this thing will not run until it's almost dead anyway, and as we just established, that is very hard to do. It's relatively fast, especially for such a colossal creature. The melee stats here are insane, with that attack being absurdly high for something that can hit so many units in a single attack animation. The defense isn't great, but again, look at the armor and HP, it doesn't really need it. The weapon strength here is insane, with heaps of armor piercing alongside magical and fire damage, meaning nothing is safe when fighting this beast. And it doesn't end there. In the passives we have Causing Fear and Terror, the ability to be buffed by Demon Smiths in battles, melee damage reflection and physical resistance the longer increases in combat, Hellish Frenzy rocketing the damage and attack even higher whilst it's healthy, and finally a sprinkling of physical and fire resistance as if it needed anything else. When I made my video on how to count the Chaos Dwarves, this was right behind the Dreadquake as the thing giving me the most trouble. You can focus fire them with like 6 max ranked gunners at once, and they'll still take minutes to die, racking up kills in the process. Now, don't get me wrong, they do go down from this much focus fire, but it takes a minute, and nothing can stop them, so what's to stop them just walking to the gunners and killing them? As long as you don't have them stood still tanking range damage, they will get value no matter where you send them, so find the biggest blob of the most expensive units you can find and send these guys in to cause some chaos. Picking up the silver medal in a second position, we have the Ancient Stegodon with the Engine of the Gods. I mean, I had to have something from the Lizardmen in a list about monsters. They have one of the largest rosters in the game, and a good chunk of that is made up of monstrous units. But among them, one sticks out as my favourite, and what I believe to be the best. The Engine of the Gods Ancient Stegodon is simply a beast, and it hardly needs to fight to do this. But keeping with tradition, let's begin with the stats. Massive armor, even beating the Kadai. The HP isn't quite as massive, but still this is one chunky boy and will not go quietly. Nice, high leadership, so will take a lot of punishment before it starts to sweat. Mid speed, but it's a big lad carrying a big payload, so fair enough. Now the melee stats aren't the greatest, but it's not all it's working with, so this is totally fair. Still plenty to deal great damage with area attacks and keep itself alive enough. Speaking of which, that weapon strength is top notch with that armor piercing and anti-infantry bonus, making it a killer in clumps of melee troops. Then we have 70 charge bonus, so cycle charging is possible with slow speed, which would look hilarious, but really isn't the point that we're building towards. We also have ranged units on its back, constantly peppering poison damage onto everything nearby, and while this damage isn't anything too crazy high, it'll be constant throughout every battle and weakening everything it hits, so it's a free passive value, which I love. And finally, the crown on this whopper is the Burning Alignment ability, which calls a literal airstrike of scorching light from the sky. This beam deals massive, constant, armor-piercing damage to everything caught in its path, and it is enough to reduce the toughest of frontlines units to scared, charred troops waving the white flag as they flee for their lives. It's stupid and absurd, and I love it so damn much. Oh, and this unit also increases Winds of Magic recharge rate, has 5% ward save. But at this point, does it really matter? Even if it was a terrible, useless unit in every other aspect, it's a dinosaur with an orbital striker machine on its back. It gets the list for that alone. Lucky for us, it also kicks ass, so it's doubly here, but not quite number one. No, it had to be the Minotaur Shields. Could it really be anything else? Honestly, after the last couple of units, these feel like a bit of a letdown since they don't have a laser weapon or look like a giant metal demon, but shielded Minotaurs are just one of the best units in the entire game, not even limited to monsters. They're so well-rounded that they might as well be a sphere. Are they as overpowered as the others that we've talked about? Honestly, probably not, but when you unlock them, they're so damn good and it elevates them to a greater plane of existence. They're tough enough for their smaller size, and these shields blocking 55% of all small arms means the main weakness of large units, which is ranged infantry, is less than half as effective against them. Imagine any other unit in the game being immune to more than half the damage coming from their main threat, like ranged units being able to ignore cav damage. It'd be crazy. But here, it's glorious, and it makes them a terror on the battlefield. For the rest of the stats, it's nice high leadership, relatively high speed for their girth, which is considerable, respectable melee stats, especially the defense helping them stay alive in melee just as easily as they do from a range. The weapon strength is also top notch for their unit size, and to top everything off, they have woodsmen, letting them move and fight in forests no problem. And Blood Greed, giving them even better offensive stats the more kills they make in combat, which shouldn't really be a challenge. These are the Ascended version of the Dragon Ogres. They may not have the same armor or speed, but they have what they need to do the job better than anything else. Yes, it's a bit of an anticlimax after the last couple of entries because they don't have a bazooka for some more excitement, as rad as that would be. CA, take notes for the next Beastmen DLC. Instead, they're just damn good at their job, making them the most reliable and best monster in the game. They can take on ranged troops and be protected on the approach, melee troops and be protected in combat. They can do anything and be relatively safe while doing it, and that is a rare trait in any unit. Shielded Minotaurs are just one of the most consistent units in the game, and in my mind, undoubtedly deserve the top spot on this list. And with that, that's our list. Let me know if you change anything in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, and if you want more Warhammer 3 top 10s, then why not check out this video to see the top 10 ranged infantry units.